Hello, and welcome back to the AquascapeGuide, where we cover all the systems that keep our planted tanks happy and healthy. If you didn't already know, my name's Phil, and I'm from the aquascapeguide.com. In this video series, we've already covered how to select a light for a planted aquarium, and even how to set up and dial in a CO2 system. If you haven't seen those videos yet, you should totally go back and watch them, as these systems you are learning about are all interconnected. But today, I wanted to talk about nutrients in our planted aquariums. We talked about carbon from CO2 in our last video, and it being considered a vital nutrient for plant growth. But there's so much more that plants need to keep them thriving. Some plants, like an Amazon sword, prefer feeding through their roots, while other plants like mosses or epiphytes can feed through the water column. Our approach is to make sure there's enough nutrients for both root-feeding plants and water column plants, just to keep everybody happy. Let's start with our approach, which is supplementing nutrients through fertilization. Our technique is based off of Liebig's Law of the minimum, which states that growth is dictated not by the total resources available, but by the scarcest resource. This means that growth will be halted if we're missing a single nutrient, regardless if all the other nutrients are still available. Liebig used the image of a barrel with unequal staves to explain how plant growth is limited by the nutrient in shortest supply, just like the level of water is limited by the shortest stave. You could be dosing all sorts of stuff, but if you're missing something like potassium, your plant's growth will be stunted. From this perspective, we should dose all the different nutrients a plant could need, so the plant doesn't say something like, "Hey, I'm missing potassium over here. I'm gonna stop growing." Furthermore, if you're hitting your plants with a medium to high par light, then asking them to grow, but not providing the nutrients needed to do so, you're really gonna stress the plant out and invite algae to come hang out. And between us plants, nobody really likes algae. Don't tell them I said that though. So, how do we make sure we are providing all the necessary nutrients at all times in our aquarium? Well, we really like the estimative index, or the EI method of fertilization. It provides everything in a small amount of excess to make sure your plants never run out of a single nutrient. Pretty awesome, huh? The EI method is broken into two categories: macronutrients and micronutrients. Micronutrients are those big elements that your plants need a lot of, and the micronutrients are just that, elements that your plants need very little of, or as the pros say, trace amounts of. The EI method also addresses the question, how much should you dose? The macros and micros were designed within a specific ratio. If you have a planted aquarium with no livestock, all you need to do is dose enough fertilizer to make sure you get your nitrates up to around 20 parts per million. Now, as a heads up, every tank is going to consume more or less fertilizer due to the aquarium's plant mass. But again, just keep your nitrates around 20 parts per million and you'll be good. Because the EI method is locked to a set ratio, if your nitrates are where they need to be, we automatically know that phosphates and potassium are where they need to be as well. So there is no need to buy a bunch of fancy test kits for all the different types of nutrients. Shoot, that's just way too much work for us, and I got photosynthesizing to do. Here are all the different nutrients that are provided when dosing the EI method. For your macros, we have nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium. For your micros, you're dosing magnesium, calcium, sulfur, boron, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, and EDTA. Do not ask me to pronounce what the acronym stands for. It's just a chelator that binds the micros together so they don't react with other nutrients in the water column, which would essentially render them useless. Now, it's really easy to start dosing the EI method. All you need is an EI kit. These kits are available on many websites, including NilocG's. I'll put a link in the description below to the EI kit, along with a little coupon code, ASG10, to receive 10% off your order. The kit comes with a few bags of individual fertilizers, which are in salt format. Also, make sure you pick up some dosing bottles, as they'll make your life a lot easier. All you gotta do is follow the recipe, add these salts into a dosing bottle with some water in it, and shake. Bam! You got yourself some fertilizer. Some additional reasons we love the EI method is 1, these bags of fertilizers will last you a long time. We were able to use one of these $45 EI kits for almost 3 years in a 30-gallon aquarium. Using an EI kit and mixing your own fertilizers is far more cost-effective than buying bottles, because companies are essentially just selling you salt water in a bottle. And 2, the nice thing about the EI method is you can customize it to your tank's needs. Let's say you have a tank that is heavily stocked with fish, and your nitrates are already sitting around 20 parts per million. You can simply reduce the amount of nitrates you're mixing up in a batch of fertilizer and rely on naturally available nitrates that your fish produce. Now, this is a little more of an advanced approach, but it's awesome to have this kind of customizability in our fertilization method. Though all-in-ones are really convenient, we obviously cannot achieve this level of customizability. You know what? We need to do a step-by-step guide on just the EI method. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on that one. But speaking of all-in-ones, if you find the whole buying a kit, mixing your own fertilizer thing a little daunting, as you're learning a lot right now, and all you want to do is just start with a baby step towards the EI method, we would suggest using an all-in-one called Thrive. I'll put a link in the description below with our coupon code, ASG10, to receive 10% off your order. We talk about Thrive's all-in-one in a video called What is the best fertilizer for a planted aquarium? I'll make sure the link is below, but the reason we like Thrive so much is it's the closest you're going to get to the EI method in a one-bottle solution. At the time of making this video, Thrive is only available in the US, so if you're in Europe, try to find TNC Complete, as that's the closest we've found on the market right now. If you're in Asia, APTEI is a great option, and if you're in Australia, LCA is also comparable. The nice thing about these fertilizers is you just dose them like you would the EI method. If you have an aquarium with just plants, keep your nitrates around 20 parts per million throughout the week. And if you have fish as well in your planted tank, since we cannot customize these fertilizers, then you need to try and keep your nitrates around 30 to 40 parts per million. Now, for those of you who freak out when you got 2 parts per million of nitrates in your tank, there's no need to worry. Nitrates can get up to 100 parts per million or more before there's ill effect on any livestock. Not that we want them that high, but again, we don't need to freak out at these lower ranges. The big thing to note when we're running the EI method is we need to process 50% water changes weekly, and we do not want to skip on them. This helps make sure we're not getting a buildup of a single nutrient in the water column, which ultimately keeps our fertilization ratio balanced. Because like everything in the hobby, consistency and balance is key. Okay, so now that we have a way to keep all the nutrient levels consistent and in abundance, how do we provide it to the plants? Well, since the EI method is dosed directly into the water column feeders like epiphytes, mosses, floaters, they're all going to pull it directly from the water. So we've got those plants covered, but what about the root feeding plants like stems or sword or carpeting plants? This is where an aquasoil comes in. But first, let's talk about cation exchange capacity. That's a mouthful. Or CEC. CEC is a measurement of a substrate's ability to soak up nutrients from the water column, kind of like a sponge, making these nutrients readily available for root feeding plants. For comparison's sake, something like Seachem fluorite, which is essentially just baked clay, has a CEC of around 1.7. Now this is really low for a substrate that is marketed as a planted tank substrate. Shoot, gravel sits at a 1.3. We also did some research on EcoComplete, which is a volcanic basalt-based substrate, and it has a CEC of around 14 to 17. So many boast that it's packed with nutrients, has a high CEC, but that's just not the case. I'll post a link to an article from our blog in the description below that talks about the scientific study that was performed on volcanic basalt, outlining its low CEC and its lack of nutrients. Now, aquasoils, on the other hand, have a CEC of around 45 to 50. That's over 3 times the absorption rate of something like EcoComplete, which is just mind-blowing. This is why we like to pair aquasoils with the EI method. It'll soak up all that goodness that the EI has to offer, keeping those root-feeding plants super happy. Now, some aquasoils have a little more nutrients than others, and depending on where you are in the world, some just might not be available in your area. The big takeaway is that we are running an aquasoil for its high CEC, and the nutrients that comes packed within it is just a bonus. Now, there is an argument that low CEC substrates are better because they'll last forever. And this is true because they're essentially rock, which provide no benefit to our root-feeding plants. Because of their low CEC and inability to soak up nutrients, we then have to start using root tabs. Then there's no way to tell if your plants have burned through these root tabs, until the plants start showing signs of nutrient deficiencies, which again mean they're stressed, then it invites algae to come hang out, yada yada yada. Okay, yes, some people do also use organic dirt, but that stuff is so messy. Every time you move a plant, you'll get a bunch of dirt, floating up into the water column, collecting on your leaves and hardscape. So then people just cap it with sand, which then blocks the soil from absorbing nutrients from the water column, and again, yada, yada, yada. Trust me, we've been down this road. It's not pretty. Just try your best to get an aqua soil that's locally available. Some of the aqua soils that we love that are available in the US are ADA Amazonia, Fluval Stratum, and Tropica's Aquarium soil. ADA Amazonia, especially version 1, has so much organic matter packed into it that it'll leach ammonia for a few weeks. Now that sounds bad, but it's literally cycling your aquarium without you having to do anything but be patient. Plus, when starting a new aquarium, plants really like the additional ammonia, which gives them a little spike of growth. Isn't that awesome? On the other end of the spectrum, something like Fluval Stratum isn't super nutrient dense, but it still has a high CEC and will soak up all the nutrients that the EI method has to offer. And lastly, Tropica's Aquarium soil feels like a good middle ground between Amazonia and Stratum. It has a high CEC and a nice amount of nutrients built into it. The nice thing about an aqua soil coming packed with nutrients is you can lean a little more on the aqua soil to provide nutrients for root feeding plants, versus them relying on the EI method. Now this gives us a little more room for error while we're learning, in case we end up dosing too little fertilizer. But again, don't get all caught up in what's the best aqua soil on the market, as we just need it for its high CEC, and there's a lot of great options globally. Now I want to be super transparent. There's this argument against aqua soils, that is that they break down and need to be replaced every couple of years. But we've had a tank with Fluval Stratum running in it for almost 6 years at this point, and the aqua soil is still intact. My best guess on why it hasn't turned to mush yet is 1, we're not really relying on the nutrients that's packed inside of the aqua soil, so the substrate is not breaking down due to nutrient exhaustion. And 2, we don't really rely on the soil's buffering capacity to soften the water. We adjust the water before it goes into the tank to make sure the GH, KH, and pH are all where they need to be. But in the end, yes, after 20 years in a tank, an aqua soil probably is going to break down and need to be replaced. But if you're anything like us, you will probably have redesigned the aquarium a few times by then, and either topped off or replaced the aqua soil altogether. So it's not really a huge deal in our mind. And that's nutrients in a nutshell. Not too bad, huh? So to recap, thanks to what we've learned from Liebig's Law of the Minimum, we just need to provide all the different micros and macros in excess to make sure our plants don't run out of anything at any time. We achieve this by running the EI method or buying an all-in-one based off of the EI method like Thrive, TNC Complete, APTEI, or LCA all-in-one, depending on where you live. The EI method not only feeds the plants in the water column, but when paired with a high CEC substrate like an aqua soil, the aqua soil will absorb all the nutrients, making it readily available for root feeding plants. And bam, everyone in the tank is happy at all times. Also, if you've chosen to go rogue and not run CO2, you'll still dose the same way by keeping your nitrates at 20 parts per million. You'll just end up needing less nutrients throughout the week because your plants will not be growing as fast as a tank that is injecting CO2. And as a reminder, just make sure you're keeping up with those 50% water changes weekly, as we don't want the fertilizers building up in the water column. And when processing your water changes, make sure your GH and KH are where they need to be. Oh shoot, we haven't talked about water parameters yet. Alright, I've got to go mix up a batch of micros and macros, so I've got to run. But we'll talk about water parameters in our next video, I promise. Later, scapers, or as your macros would say, "Ch later."